Got a question.
It's a beautiful day on the South Strand. Welcome to Conversations with the Hoff. I'm Steve Hoffman, your host, and with me in the studio today is the executive producer of Liberty Crack Media, Trip Detmering.
Hello, everybody.
For those of you who have been following the shenanigans happening at our South Carolina State Legislature, you're probably going to be familiar with today's call-in guest, former state representative and author of the periodic Bad Bill Sheet, Johnathan Hill.
Yay.
Representative Hill is a former South Carolina state representative known for his uncompromising, limited government philosophy and his willingness to publicly challenge legislation he viewed as unconstitutional, overreaching, or fiscally irresponsible. He has worked as a software engineer and consultant and owns CompRight Enterprises. He served District 8 in the South Carolina House from 2015 to 2022, where he became known as a mastery of House rules and his reputation as a principled dissenter. That's saying it tactfully. During his tenure, Representative Hill frequently published or supported the bad bill analysis, efforts to flag legislation he believed expanded government power, increased spending, or violated individual liberties. His legislative style earned him both strong grassroots support and friction within the General Assembly. No kidding. Until his departure in 2020, upon his departure in 2022, the House formally recommended him for service and steadfast commitment to limited government. I think you also get an award, right?
I believe so.
Yeah. So welcome to the show, Johnathan.
Yeah, thanks for being here. It's good to be back.
Yeah, thanks for being back.
Thanks for having me.
So before we get into the specific legislative issues, the numerous bad bills, your bio says that you were a state representative for 7 years for District 8. Have you ever considered running for the State House again?
Well, I'll tell you what, this session in particular has made me remember all the reasons why I'm glad I'm not there in person.
I bet. Yeah.
Especially the fact that you get done at 5 p.m. on Adjournment Day, which is yesterday, and it's a day that you're counting down to all year. Everyone is. I don't care who you are, even the Speaker of the House. And then you get done, you adjourn at 5 p.m., and in an hour, the governor calls you back into session at 11 a.m. the next morning. So they're back today. So I'm very glad not to be in the State House.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's quite an effort to go through when you analyze all these bills that are being presented to the legislature. And basically you rip them up, you rip them a good one when if they increase taxes or government spending, if they create new regulations or mandates, if they grow the bureaucracy, or they favor special interests, or they weaken parental rights or medical freedom, or they basically just infringe on our constitutional rights. Now, I'm sure that's a very few number of bills that meet those categories. No, I'm being facetious, obviously.
Yeah. I was just looking at the index of everything that we've covered this year, and just the index is 4 pages.
Wow.
That ought to tell you something.
How many bills do you think this represents as far as a percentage of the total bills that are introduced to the legislature?
It's a tiny fraction of the bills introduced that actually get a vote. And that's why my focus has always been only on the bills that move.
Oh, that actually
define that as a bill that moves is going to be a bill that gets put on a agenda somewhere, either in committee or on the floor, where it could possibly get a vote.
Okay, so let's get started and talk about some of these really bad bills. What, in your opinion, what would be one of the worst bills that's been introduced that infringes on our individual liberties?
Well, one of the bills that I probably personally despise the most was the so-called parental rights bill by Speaker of the House Tommy Pope.
Wow.
Just over and over and over again, this bill, in the name of trying to protect parental rights, especially in a public school setting, in terms of a parent's relationship with the district, it will state a right, but then it will cordon off that right. It will place limits. It will say, there's just a lot of really objectionable stuff, and it was, quite frankly, it was a little bit hard to break through the framing on that one. When you say this is a parental rights bill, and a layman looks at it and sees a bunch of rights sounding language in there, they tend to believe that frame, and when you tell them that rights are meant to be respected, they're not meant to be regulated by the state. They're meant to be complied with by the state. There was a lot of grassroots controversy about that one. Ultimately, I'm glad to report that one did not pass. That's House Bill 4757.
Well, that's good, but
that is one of those that did not pass. But it's something to watch for. It could come back up next year.
It seems like what I call legislative Trojan horses. They give these things titles where they throw in rights and things. And when they say rights, they actually mean restrictions. And when they say, reduction, they actually mean increase and things like that. Is that something that they purposely cook into this this morass and sausage so that the public doesn't take a closer look and only watchdogs like you are able to do this?
Well, I do think that's where I'm uniquely positioned to do it, because I have an activist heart, and I also have a legislator's experience, so I know the tricks.
Yeah.
I know the tricks that they pull. I'm not an attorney, but I am a software developer, as you noted in the opening, and so that does make me very, very attentive to detail. And it's, there's plenty of situations like this where they try and pull the wool. Sometimes all it takes is for somebody to blow the whistle for that to be thwarted. Another example I could give you that came up near the end of session was there was a bill to outright ban kratom. Now, kratom was regulated with a consumer safety bill, I believe, just a year ago.
Yeah.
And then the House brought forward a bill to outright ban it. And then they rewrote the bill in committee in a way that seemed to protect the legal status of kratom, but it took a lot of really careful re-examination to see that, no, actually, this is a really clever way to still ban it, just with different words. So
for an old guy like me who's behind the times, what is kratom?
Yeah, that's a plant, and some people use it for management of certain physical symptoms. I believe pain type stuff. Some have said they've been able to get off of opioids.
It would be on the shelves right next to the CBDs and things like that, and it was getting very popular. But once again, you've got the alcohol lobby that was trying to get into it. The medical lobby was trying to reduce it. So was I guess you'd call it, like the things you would get at these, vitamin shops and things like that. That lobby was trying to get these things out.
So if they're going to go after kratom, they're probably going to go after what keeps me awake, and that's my CBD. I got to have my CBD.
They have come out with.
They would never do that, right?
Oh, they have been doing. It's almost verbatim. They have almost used the same script to come after your CBD.
Some of the same people that were pushing the kratom bill did also try to come after hemp.
Yep.
H3924.
Yep, huge carve outs into the hemp bill to ultimately ban a lot of stuff that don't need to be banned.
It's basically banning hemp products. I mean, this is a growing industry in South Carolina, the hemp farmers and stuff. Hemp can be used for a multitude of uses, and hemp farming would be a big economic stimulus in South Carolina. What is the legislature trying to do here? Kill the agricultural economy? Or it doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, it's like on the one hand, you see them trying to do economic development deals, like another bill that would have cut the constitutional 9.5% property tax on vehicles that applies to airplanes. There was a bill to create an exemption that would effectively lower that rate to 6%. for airplanes. Airplanes are not cheap vehicles. You can imagine how much money we're talking about.
Wow.
Hundreds of thousands, probably, if not millions. And
Boing.
they rewrote the bill to say that we'll give fee in lieu of tax deals to any airline that meets our criteria and that we sign off on, and only next year.
Uh-huh.
Come on. So we want to control the business growth in South Carolina.
Yeah.
We say we want to develop businesses, but then, on the other hand, we're making life harder. We're putting more, we're raising licensing fees for different occupations. We're putting more license requirements on new occupations. There's been several of those this year. All that kind of stuff actually hinders the growth of business, not spurring it on. So
Exactly.
it's just it's the tyrant's move, right? They want to be in control. They want to be in control of money. They want to be in control of everything.
Episode 1 of Microphone Monkeys drops this Thursday, January 15th. If you are into sadism, or just pain in general, tune in on your favourite podcast platform like Spotify or Apple Podcast and more.
So much for economic freedom. Talking about other freedoms, our legislators don't seem to understand the right to due process. What is that, the Fourth Amendment, Fifth Amendment? And the Institute for Justice talks about, the egregious actions like civil asset forfeiture.
Yes.
Our legislature is definitely in support of civil asset forfeiture. You've got H 4292, legalizing automotive theft by cop. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so that bill definitely went through several different iterations during the process, but the gist of it, as I understand it, is saying that you can't have a bunch of hoodlums to take over a roadway and run some kind of informal or formal event where they do stunts on the road or race or run nitrous powered cars and do all this all this stuff, and you've got a bunch of bystanders. The original bill was pretty severe. I mean, it would hand out misdemeanors just for being there watching.
Wow.
To a lot of people, and they peeled some of that back and watered the bill down, which was appropriate. But unfortunately, near the end, they actually strengthened the forfeiture language in the bill that basically said that cops can forfeit vehicles that they seize here, and specifically said that the proceeds have to go to the police department that seized it. So it creates that perverse incentive, especially in smaller towns where maybe they don't have as much money, and so they're going to take advantage of opportunities to get more resources. If you ever see a cop driving around in something that doesn't look like a normal police car, be it a really, cool dude truck or sporty car or something like that, dollars to no nuts, they seized that from somebody, and they probably did it without due process. Now, what I mean by that is the difference between criminal asset forfeiture and civil asset forfeiture, as the Institute for Justice has been explaining for years, is that in criminal asset forfeiture, you get accused of a crime, you go through trial, you get convicted by a jury of your peers, and part of the punishment is you lose the property that was involved in the commission of your crime or that you gained from that commission of a crime.
Yeah.
So if you've been, selling drugs or something, and you bought this vehicle or these guns or whatever the case may be, losing that property should be part of the punishment for the crime. Not advocating necessarily that our gun laws are just, but just giving a common example that you see in headlines. Now, if that's different from a civil asset forfeiture proceeding where, let's say, there's a traffic stop and you have $20,000 in cash, in a bag in your car, and the cop thinks he smells pot.
Yeah.
Or claims that he thinks he smells pot. And he takes that money because he says, clearly you've been dealing pot. Otherwise, why would you have $20,000 in cash in your car? Normal people don't carry around $20,000 in cash. I'm taking that you've been dealing drugs, and makes the accusation, holds that money, and then a judge schedules a forfeiture hearing within 30 days, or at least they're supposed to, where you have to come and prove your innocence, not your guilt, but your innocence, in order to get your property back. So good luck with that. Most people don't have the ability to do that very well. You're going up against the government, and what ends up happening so often is they just end up keeping the money, if through hassle, if nothing else. I mean, there was no crime committed, at least none that was adjudicated. So, if a cop rolls up on, somebody racing down the road, does this new bill mean that they can take your car if you were racing on the road? I mean,
yeah,
that seems pretty severe.
Yeah, I'm very concerned because it's supposed to be innocent until proven guilty, and now they just kind of flipped it to guilty until proven innocent. Plus, it creates an environment of policing for profit. And the police department used to have a motto, what do you call it? A motto?
Yeah,
a motto, which was to protect and serve. Well, so much for that. If you're policing for profit, you're not protecting and serving the public. Just the opposite.
It's a perverse incentive.
Definitely.
I do know that there are many who take that motto very, very seriously, but this is the system that they operate within.
Yeah.
Well, they're just complying with state law. The legislature, the state politicians are encouraging it.
Right.
I'm sure there are policemen out there that want to do their job right and want to protect and serve, and not want to be somebody that's viewed as a criminal by the population.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and the worst offender on civil asset forfeiture just got sentenced, and that was former sheriff of Spartanburg, Chuck Wright.
Yeah.
So one can hope that the amount of this happening in South Carolina will decrease now.
Good.
But this was being pushed all the way from the highest levels, all the way from Alan Wilson and the chief of SLED themselves.
Well, I'd just love to see asset courts where anything that's seized by anybody has to go into just a public, what I would call public warehouse or a public lot, and then they have to go to court and prove why it is they should have those assets, as opposed to having it sold and go to the public coffers for debt, and or go back to the person who originally owned the property.
Right. I'll give a quick shout out on this to my friend, State Senator Tom Fernandez. Prior to going into the state Senate, I don't know how many people know this, he used to run a drone business.
Oh.
And there was a drone regulation bill that came up in this session, and scrutinizing that and looking at the forfeiture language there. If you run a drone, let's say, without the proper FAA authorizations, or
Mm-hmm.
or you get too close to a military installation or something like that, and they take your drone down, they're not allowed to forfeit that.
Oh.
In fact, they're specifically in the law not allowed to keep any proceeds for that. They're not even allowed to keep the drone. They're required to rehome it through an administrative procedure, which sounds an awful lot to me like finding another qualified drone operator and say, here, take this, take this off their hands. So anyway, there are ways of doing these things, and we don't have to keep doing the unjust, illegal stuff.
Yeah. Senator Fernandez was recently elected to the state Senate, and he's like the lone Freedom Caucus member of the state Senate, if there is such a thing. But it's good to see him in there.
Right. I know Senator Lee Bright is also extremely conservative. Glad to have him back in there too, and hoping they and some of the others will kill as many bad bills as possible for us in the coming years.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm certainly doing my part to try to encourage that.
There you go.
Definitely. At the national level, our privacy rights are being violated every day with more and more surveillance type legislation, and it also happens at the state legislature. We have S447, license plate surveillance. You were very critical of that particular piece of legislation.
Yes. And that comes at the cost of an estimated fiscal impact of $310,000, which seemed a little low to me for this type of policy. But yeah, I mean, anytime the government is automatically reading your license plate, that has the potential to go into a database and function as a de facto tracking system.
Yep.
So they can at least know where your car is. They may or may not be able to know for sure who is driving the vehicle, but they at least know where your vehicle is.
Well, with AI, they can all of a sudden marry that information with your cell phone information, and yeah.
Well, yes, and that's already happening in certain situations. Again, I don't know how many people know this, but law enforcement already has fusion centers. So there's a lot of focus and scrutiny on new data center development with AI and so forth. But actually, law enforcement have been using data centers for 15 years, and what they've been doing is taking all these pipes of data from the state and from local law enforcement entities and putting it all in one massive centralized database where they can correlate all that data together. And it's very useful for them in some situations in chasing down criminals, but for the private citizen, it's also a very terrifying prospect that they have a lot more information on you at any given time than you might expect that they would.
Yeah.
Also, our state legislature doesn't seem to like us to have freedom of speech also. There's a bill out there called the Gag Bill, S960.
Why don't they call it the Gag Johnathan Hill Bill?
Right. Or Gag the Palmetto State Watch Bill, or Gag the South Carolina Policy Institute Bill.
Yeah.
Americans for Prosperity. There's any number of issue-focused organizations that this was very overtly targeted at. Mm-hmm. And there are some leftist ones too that this would have impacted as well. You know, I think a lot of people get lost in the haze, in the hot air that politicians blow about stuff like this, and you know, politicians will frame it in terms of, well, we need transparency. If somebody is going to influence politics, you have a right to know who they are. Well, if you as a private citizen are trying to influence politics, does everyone have a right to know who you are? I mean, that's really what the question is.
Right.
And our founders would say, absolutely the heck not.
Right.
That's what the First Amendment is all about, is protected free speech, free political speech in particular, free speech that may be sometimes critical of the elected officials, the incumbents in particular.
Right.
And free speech about issues that are before us, you know, that your elected officials are dealing with. So I really like the way former director of the South Carolina Policy Council, Ashley Landis, who was there back in the day when I was in the State House, she used to say on this issue specifically, and they fought against the Gag Act back then as well, she used to say, transparency is for government. Privacy is for citizens.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think you really can sum up that whole debate with that one statement. Transparency is for government. Privacy is for citizens.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you've also got my particular state senator who wants to go after you for his definition of hate speech. And that's S702, criminal coercive control.
Oh, boy. Yeah. Yeah, that was so these bills that we've mentioned on surveillance and free speech attacks, fortunately, these did not pass this session. I want to be clear with everyone about that. Yeah. But it is something we need to be extremely vigilant about.
The voters still have to be aware of the legislatures that are proposing these things. Sorry to cut you off, but yeah, they didn't make it out of the legislature. But we got these legislatures doing these things in the first place. We need to communicate to the electorate that, hey, watch these guys. Why aren't you sending these guys to Columbia, to Mordor on the Congaree, you know?
Right. Yeah. So S702 by Goldfinch, who filed and got this heard, in the lead up to the election that he's running in for Attorney General. He's certainly, this is a very naked pander that he's doing here. He's trying to be Mr. Good Guy for all the battered women out there. And I'm not trying to disparage anyone who has gone through, a bad time, a hard time. But as I dialogued with some of the folks, this is one of them when, my criticisms, definitely met with some harsh counter criticism from certain quarters in the grassroots. And the thing that I just come back to is that, look, if, when you have a psychopath or you have an abuser who is hell-bent on doing their thing and making your life miserable, they're going to use every avenue at their disposal, including every law in the state. And, the outcome is very much going to be dependent on the relevant state actors seeing through the facade of lies. And, how much do you trust the state to actually get this right? Or is the answer going to be to put more tools in the hands of the state? Is it because they use the tools that we have already given them so well that you trust them to give them even more tools that abusers are surely not going to use against you?
That's right.
We're not thinking. We're just emoting at this point.
Exactly.
In the libertarian community, we call this unintended consequences. So you think you have a good piece of legislation, but the unintended consequences are egregious. They're going to step on your individual rights of free speech.
Right.
Okay, so our politicians also, they don't like competition. They definitely don't like competition. They got a good old boy game going on there.
Especially in theft.
There's a bill out there called 3557, H3557, has to do with filing fees. I can think of no better piece of legislation to keep third parties out of the electoral process than this particular bill.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it will absolutely keep third parties out of the governor's race and other statewide races where the filing fee is very high. It may not keep them out of state legislative races where the filing fee is relatively low. But, running for U.S. Senate, you're going to see fewer third-party candidates there. Is that a good thing? I don't think it is.
No, not at all. Especially with the rise of some of these newer third parties like the Forward Party and things like that. Even though we might not be in lockstep with these people, they do have fresh ideas. They do have some great people that would be coming out. But again, it's I guess we would say the uniparty, the two major parties that are trying to lock people out. And they do it with a bunch of scare tactics. Oh, we're trying to keep the communists out and things like that. And it really doesn't ring true. The other thing, too, is
unfortunately, this is a bill that did pass. So H3557 is at the governor's desk to be signed.
Oh, yeah. And the other thing is that it makes the third parties that do contribute actually pay for, because they don't really will not have the elections. They usually do through their party what is the word I'm looking for here, Steve? Instead of having a election,
convention,
convention.
Yeah. So we're actually paying for the major parties' primaries with our funds, right. And it's just punitive all the way around.
Yeah, that's a big rub. I mean, it's one thing. I'm not against filing fees if if you're having a primary and the state is having to run an election in order to nominate your candidates.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're not involving the state in that, and you're having your own convention, the state shouldn't be charging anything. The other thing that this bill did is it allows the parties themselves to authorize adding a surcharge to the filing fee that then goes, I believe, to the party. So originally that was limited to up to $100. They removed that limit. That amount, that certification fee or convenience fee or whatever that the individual parties want to levy is basically open-ended.
Yeah. And then some of that was to discourage what we called fusion candidates that would one person would run under two party flags. Yeah.
There was last session legislation that would have outright banned that.
Right.
I opposed that bill as well. We'll have to go back and check on the status of what happened with that.
Yeah.
So before we wrap up here, one of your categories or your criteria is you label something a bad bill if it favors special interests. And you want to talk a little bit about that? Is there any particular piece of legislation? I can think of Scout Motors, but anything egregious that happened this session that favored special interests?
Yeah. I mean, I usually use the words legal plunder to describe this. That's,
right.
that's
a good one.
From Frederick Bastiat from way back in the 1800s,
Yep.
who wrote a tiny little book called The Law that was so influential in my thinking, and it should be required reading for everyone in office.
Absolutely.
Basically, any bill that takes tax dollars and redirects it to, any non-government project. So, a nonprofit outside of government, or some constituency or something like that, even if it's a worthy cause. So you see, I would categorize farm bailouts. I believe there was one of those included in the state budget. You see a lot of emergency type funding, trying to help either farmers or, in some cases like foresters. That's a recent one that's come up with, money going out to people that had timber that was destroyed in Helene a couple of years ago. These sorts of things. It's not the role of government to be in the insurance business. And unfortunately, we do have some situations where you're forced to pay into government insurance regimes, essentially. But it's not the taxpayer's job to make you whole when things happen. It's not, there's absolutely nothing virtuous about being generous with other people's money. Hey, Steve, I'm gonna take $5,000 of your money, and I'm gonna make a very generous donation to my favorite charity. That's legal plunder.
Right.
That's legal plunder. I couldn't legally do that as a private citizen. Why do we let the government do that at the force of law? Yeah, it's the same thing.
Well, that's why the voters in a particular district, when your candidate comes for your town hall meetings or whatever, you need to ask the question to the candidate, what is the primary role of government? And if the answer is not to protect and preserve the individual rights of the voters, then you might want to start looking for another candidate. Definitely.
Well, and there's good reasons to think that this shouldn't be the role of government as well. I mean, we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that everything that government touches turns to gold, right?
Yeah, right.
Okay. When government interferes in the economy, bad things happen.
Wait, you don't even have to put in comedy in
with the private industry with its evil profit motives pretty much always does a better job than the government at just about anything you could name.
Yeah.
There are a few jobs that government has to do. I'm not an anarchist, but it's not like government is any sort of paragon of efficiency or humaneness or anything like that.
We could go on for days talking about that particular subject, but unfortunately, I have to wrap it up. So
I'm going to slap the label of minarchist on them, but yeah.
Right. So thanks for being on the show, Representative Hill. I hope our listening audience can appreciate the tremendous effort it takes to analyze the hundreds of bills presented to our state legislature each year. If more people read your bad bill sheets and voted the big government tax and spend politicians out of public office from both parties, South Carolina might actually one day be a state that actually enhances or embraces limited government, individual, and economic freedom. I can only wish and pray for that day. So the legislative session ended yesterday, but it's going to start again, I guess, according to Johnathan Hill, Monday.
We're in overtime, actually, today. Yeah.
Fantastic. So one of my next sessions are episodes of Conversations with Hoff. We're going to take an example out of Microsoft Monkeys, and we're going to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of this year's legislative session.
Microphone monkeys.
Microphone. Did I just do it again?
Yeah.
So that episode should be very informative and a lot of fun. Thanks for listening to Conversations with the Hoff. And now a word from our glorious leader, the executive producer of Liberty Crack Media, Trip Detmering.
Oh, and it's always great to have our good friend Johnathan Hill on with us. If you want to find out more about the Bad Bill Sheet, we will have a link to his Substack in our show notes. And if you want to find more content from Liberty Crack Media, go to libertycrackmedia.com. And if you really are starting to feel generous with the money that's not being taxed, go and hit the donate button when you get onto our website. And once again, thank you again, and come and listen to more Conversations with the Hoff.
Leaning close, got a question in a black coffee globe. From campus quads to the Capitol steps, we're talking who we are, what come next. Conversations with the Hoff, where the big ideas kick the shoes off. Liberty tradition, side by side, argue, laugh, then let it ride. Conversations with the Hoff, turn it up and turn it over in your mind. Tax to the hill, or left alone, how much power do we loan? Rights on paper, rights in hand. Where do we draw that line in the sand? Conversations with a Hoff, where the big ideas kick their shoes off. Liberty tradition, side by side, argue, laugh, and let it ride. Conversations with the Hoff, turn it up and turn it over in your mind. Is it either or in between? Old school roots and a freedom dream. Pull that thread, see what you find. One more question, we're out of time. Conversations with the Hoff, where the big ideas kick the shoes off. Liberty tradition, side by side, argue, laugh, then let it ride. Conversations with the Hoff, hit subscribe and take a little time to think it through.